Rebecca Barhar-Cook. I know Trustee Barr, thank you. And if there are any other trustees, please, I want to be sure. The lights are bright here? Okay, but thank you. And thanks, so many members of our leadership team are here and have been part of helping us with today's program. But again, today we're discussing the vital role of research universities and the important role that they play in supporting our quality of life and economic competitiveness in partnership with the federal government. We need to look only as far as the Mackinac Bridge, where Michigan State University engineers tested advanced self-powered sensors to monitor its structural safety. And I know many of you saw that bridge as you were heading over this direction, probably drove across that bridge. Now MSU engineers are developing AI-powered systems that could help prioritize bridges and other structures in need of attention. Some of the funding for the sensor deployed project came from the Federal Highway Administration, just one of many examples that we could give about and provide about the importance of partnerships with the federal government. In fact, the federal government is the single largest source of academic research funding across the country, and universities themselves are the next highest funder and footing a growing share of that overall research infrastructure. This innovation-focused relationship grew from the realization during World War II that research universities are perfectly positioned to conduct much of the nation's vital discovery and development work. Since then, many life-enhancing products from the game-changing chemotherapy drugs developed at Michigan State to the smartphones in our pockets came from federally supported university research laboratories. Government sponsorship of higher education knowledge discovery predates World War II. Michigan State University in and of itself was an experiment founded 170 years ago by the state of Michigan to invest in the growing promise of scientific agriculture. Michigan State became an acknowledged prototype for what has become America's great system of land-grant universities through the federal 1862 Morrill Act. And I've often said that if you think about higher education as an industry, it is the only industry that you look in the rearview mirror and there's no other country, not another nation that's even close to us with respect to higher education if we think about it as an industry. And most of our industries, sadly, we can't say the same about. In the 20th century, the university-federal partnership helped make the United States the innovation and higher education powerhouse in the world. Federal investment enables high-risk, early-stage innovation that commercial entities wouldn't likely fund. It's the starter fuel, as we like to say, for American breakthroughs in health, security, and technology. The facility for rare isotope beams, better known as EFRB, at Michigan State University, everybody in the room has heard of this, is a great example of this. This is a U.S. Department of Energy Office of Science national user facility and the world's highest energy, most powerful heavy ion accelerator. All told, EFRB has brought in nearly $2 billion in federal investment since 2012, 79% of which has been spent in Michigan and 95% across the U.S. We like to say that EFRB is built and run with Midwestern grit while supporting knowledge, discovery, and national security from right here in Michigan. EFRB produces rare isotopes, short-lived nuclei, no longer found on Earth, enabling science that only America can do today and making future innovations possible. From improving cancer treatments to making stronger, lighter materials to applications in manufacturing, energy, and security. EFRB also supports U.S. industry by helping address the national shortage of microelectronics testing by assessing chips used in spaceflight, wireless technology, and autonomous vehicles. Across Michigan's 4 major research universities, federal funding powers nearly $2 billion in research annually. It supports close to 25,000 jobs here in Michigan generating more than $8.3 billion in total economic impact. And in the process, we're training the nation's next generation of scientists and technologists. Over 42% of federally funded research staff at our Michigan research universities are students. So, it's been disappointing to watch the federal administration slashing critical investments in university research instead of supporting the sources of our mutual success. I wrote about this in about 2 months ago in a Detroit News op-ed. MSU is working diligently through our in-house response teams, government relations staff, and national associations to track, understand, and respond to these evolving and shifting federal mandates. And I know some of you in the room today are working very hard and advocating with us, and so I want to take this opportunity to thank you, and I talked with several of you already just today. So far, the government has frozen some $11 billion in academic research funding in the United States across a wide variety of programs and projects. At Michigan State, work funded through USAID and conducted by researchers like David Dalchis to create more resilient crops for partners abroad and benefiting Michigan farmers was eliminated. In 20 Michigan counties, work to improve health outcomes for expectant mothers and babies was conducted by MSU public health researcher Jennifer Johnson and now faces severe cuts through the National Institutes of Health. A $2.8 million Detroit wastewater surveillance project, among the first in the world to be able to predict COVID-19 over 2 weeks before clinical cases emerged, was also cut as researchers worked to refine it and expand its scope. And access to higher education offered by MSU through the AmeriCorps program, directly supporting more than 5,000 Michigan high school seniors and 22,000 high school students annually, is also at risk. These are often the first-generation students, low-income students, and we help them fill out their applications and financial aid paperwork and counsel them on post-secondary pathways. The consequences of this loss in a state desperately working to increase educational attainment and workforce training are concerning. And there's much to be concerned about in threats to medical research. Cancer research, for example, relies on a dynamic ecosystem including universities, pharma companies, biotech startups, federal agencies, and private foundations. The United States leads the world in cancer research, and we've witnessed dramatic declines in cancer mortality as a result, by more than a third since 1991. But with the federal government's retreat from research, further progress is jeopardized, and that will have a profound impact on the lives of people that we care for and care about. We're going to hear from some of the people who are on the ground here in Michigan every day, guarding the health of our communities, taking on research challenges, and activating talent in Michigan. So again, thank you for being here. We have an incredible panel, so let's get started. Go Green.
Please welcome Senior Scientist and Scientific Director of the Henry Ford and MSU Pancreatic Cancer Alliance, Howard Crawford. Founder of Blue Lake Ideas and past chair of the Board of Directors at the Detroit Regional Chamber, Matt Elliott. Associate Dean, Public Health, and C.S. Mott Endowed Professor of Public Health at the College of Human Medicine at Michigan State University, Mona Hanna. And to moderate the discussion, please welcome politics editor and columnist at the Detroit News, Chad Livengood.
Well, thank you all for trekking to the island on Tuesday afternoon. Matt has a pretty good theory about why you all came. That's because there was a free lunch today. So, welcome, and really happy to have you all here and to be moderating this discussion. I wanted to start out with because this is a little bit of a heavy topic to start a Mackinac Policy Conference on. So, Dr. Crawford, can you start by just tell us a little bit, like kind of boil down what you do, what your research is focused around, try to demystify university research for us for a second.
And you want me to talk about pancreatic cancer to pep everybody up? Is that right? So I've been in the university systems for many years now. I work primarily at Henry Ford in Detroit. And I'm building a center of researchers that are focused on pancreatic cancer specifically. And I don't know, has anybody in the audience been affected directly or indirectly by pancreatic cancer? So you know what the story is. Someone gets diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, there's a median survival time of about 10 months. The first things they usually hear from their doctor is to get their affairs in order. And the thing that I always want to tell everyone that ever hears that, ever hears about someone else going through that, the first thing you should tell them is get yourself to a university hospital. Because that's where the second opinions are going to come, that's where the clinical trials are being conducted, and that's your best hope. And I have to say that when I started doing this research 25 years ago, the 5-year survival rate was 5%. Now we're at 13%. And that's mostly because of the progress we've been making at the university system in the university hospitals. And I'm glad to be a part of this endeavor. I'm proud to be part of the team, the global team that is making a difference for this disease. But I'm not just here to represent pancreatic cancer, so I'm happy to take all those questions anytime or after this. But cancer research in general, I've worked on many different cancers. Health research is something that we need to be focused on. And I want to start calling this disease cure research, not just cancer, but all kinds of diseases that are being studied at the academic level, and the fundamental research that can only be done at the university level because there's no profit in it. Is the companies are not going to want to do fundamental research. But what I'm doing now, this progress we've made, this is stuff that started 40 years ago, not 4 years ago. And what we have to have is a continuity of research so that we can make this progress mean something, and we can refine it, and that we can really bring these cancer treatments and all disease treatments to the public so that you can all benefit from it. And let's face it, if I'm talking to business people, your workforce needs to be healthy first and foremost. And so everyone will benefit from this. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to keep on my soapbox here, but we'll get into it in a little bit. But pancreatic cancer specifically is reaching a renaissance period that we have what we think are pretty close to cures, and with more research will become cures over the next 10 years. But if we stop research now, even if we interrupt it for 6 months, there's going to be a huge delay in all of this progress. And everything that we've been doing for the past 40 years will be upended.
Dr. Mona, as we know you as Dr. Mona, can you talk a little bit about what you do and how your research has evolved in the 10 years since Flint?
Yeah, thanks, Chad. So most of you know me as the pediatrician who did the research to help expose the Flint water crisis. And it was the university, it was research that was the scientific safety net. It was the source of truth. It was the check and balance to kind of protect a community. And for me, that's what I think kind of research and what I think of a role of a university. We are there to kind of work hand in hand with communities to kind of promote the common good, to do the difficult work that nobody else wants to do the trusted, credible work to improve kind of the situation of the populations that we're privileged to work in. So that work was based on research. It was science that kind of helped protect an entire community. And really since then, the research that we continue to do is to continue kind of to advance those best practices to protect kids and communities everywhere. So right now I serve as a pediatrician still in Flint, the Associate Dean for Public Health with Michigan State University, and I get to still do lots of awesome research today. day. Not so much in terms of disease treating, but more of disease prevention, which public health is all about. It's about making sure that we can put into place interventions and programs that protect health, that promote health, so that we don't have to spend so much time and money and resources once people get sick, but to make sure people can grow up as healthy as possible. So that's a lot about my work and my research right now. So there's lots of different kinds of research. It's all important research. And once again, we also very much rely on federal resources, really a blend of resources to make this impossible work become possible.
Matt, Elliott, you are, well, let's just ask this question. How did a banker get in between a pediatrician and a cancer doc?
I must be doing something right. I don't know.
So you look like an oddball in this, but tell us about what you're doing at MSU. Tell us a little bit about what your focus is on and how you've kind of come to intersect with the research end of the university.
Well, I have the privilege of co-chairing the Green and White Council, which is one of President Guskiewicz's signature initiatives. And what we're trying to do is more deeply connect the university with the business community to really drive some economic development outcomes and also workforce development outcomes. So we want to connect students with work-based learning opportunities. We want to make sure students are prepared for the challenges of the future. The thought experiment is the crop of students who graduated a few weeks ago will retire in the year 2070. So think about the amount of change that those students will go through. We want to make sure that they're equipped for that. And then the third thing is, and this is I think where the research piece comes in more closely, is we want to make sure that we at Michigan State are doing our part to drive the state of Michigan forward against the biggest challenges that we have. One of them is our innovation economy and the work that the universities do across the country, but especially in Michigan, is absolutely critical. So here's a couple of stats for you. This is courtesy of the University Research Corridor. Every dollar that's spent at a URC, one of the 4 R1s, comes back to the state of Michigan fivefold. So there's a 5-for-1 return on that. Nationally, every dollar that's spent of federally funded research returns about $1.70 back to the economy, meaning it's self-funding. It's not a zero-sum game. These are investments. So these are things that are critical to a state where we're a top 10 state for R&D. So it's absolutely critical that this pipeline continue, and that's one of the things that we want to make sure is still going to happen during our work as the Green and White Council.
Dr. Crawford, can you talk a little bit about programs either at Henry Ford or Michigan State that are currently in danger, that you know or at least what you know about current status of grants through NIH or other federal sources?
Sure, and it's not to be impolite here to the businessman, but actually it's $2.70 for every dollar that's spent. It brings back the dollar and then $1.70 on top of it. So 170% return on investment. So I think that's a pretty good deal. Actually, when I heard about the park services, they're 500%. So they've really impressed me. But yeah, with regards to the question, what we see is right now that there's lots of concern about grants that are being taken away. There have been several grants that have been taken away, canceled, which is not something we've even heard of before, particularly at Michigan State, at the University of Michigan, and Henry Ford. Henry Ford, as you can understand, we're in Detroit. Our patient population is very diverse. And the funding for health disparities and racial disparities of disease, there's a racial disparity for pancreatic cancer, for instance. The studies that we're doing there are directly under threat. I look at it as you learn something from everyone's disease, no matter what their background is, their racial background or otherwise. I mean, we learn all kinds of things about diabetes and cancer from mice and lizards and fish. I can imagine that if we learn anything about any one of your diseases in this particular room, it's going to benefit the person right next to you because we'll be prepared for that sort of method of the disease forming and progressing. So we're very much concerned that the health disparities research that's going on at Henry Ford, which is quite a bit of how people are funded, are directly under threat. We also have several programs for funding a more diverse workforce, including scientists, that have been funded based on programs that are targeting them specifically. And right now we're very concerned about some of those scientists who are every bit as good a scientist as I'll ever be, has nothing to do with their background, their ethnicity, and has nothing to do with that. It's just the opportunity that they've been provided and now is under threat. So it very much distresses me as a leader within my group to look at these young people thinking that this is not the career for them. This is not something that they're going to be able to keep doing and thrive and take care of their families.
Why is the health disparities programs or research, why is that being targeted? Do you have a sense of that?
I have a sense of it, but but what exactly how to answer it?
Racism.
Okay, that's what she said. but I want to also put in this whole idea that DEI is being targeted. That's diversity of your workforce. And everybody in this room knows that. The idea that suddenly the health disparities is being lumped in as if it's exactly the same thing is, to me, mind-blowing. So I believe Mona had the only correct answer for why this might be happening, because there's no connection between the two. And so, other than the fact that there's a race difference.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Mona, you want to expand upon that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is what we're seeing all across. What things are being attacked are things like gender identity issues, racial disparity issues, be it in health or public health or education. So I mean, I'm not the one making these decisions, but what it appears to be is kind of a deliberate attack on certain kinds of people.
So research that is specifically looking at African Americans in urban settings.
Yeah.
Is being targeted just because it has a racial component to it?
Absolutely, same with gender identity issues. So if somebody was, researching, gay men's acceptance of a certain kind of treatment, those kind of grants are also being cut.
Okay. Dr. Mona, where are, in your area of MSU, and can you talk a little bit about some of the programs that you all are kind of trying to figure out if they're going to last much longer?
Yeah, so we've built this incredible infrastructure at MSU, in Flint specifically, to do public health work. Thanks to the incredible support of the CS Mott Foundation, we have the CS Mott Department of Public Health, which is based in Flint. It's the first kind of named department after a foundation. We have been working hand in hand with the community to improve health outcomes even before the water crisis. And we have done it in a very kind of community partnered way, which is unheard of. We asked the people of Flint, like, hey, if we were going to bring like top-notch researchers here to Flint, like, what do you want us to work on? And through a series of kind of interviews and meetings and focus groups and surveys, the people of Flint said, hey, we want you to work on these big issues: healthy behaviors, behavioral health, chronic diseases, and disparities. So the people of Flint identified these big issues, and then as a university, we have been working to hire incredible translation researchers to improve public health. This was all before the Flint water crisis because of the long-standing kind of disparities and health inequities in the city, and MSU's long-standing commitment to improve health in the city of Flint. So I think we just passed the $200 million mark for our Department of Public Health. We have received over $200 million in grants, the fastest growing kind of unit in the college. Amazing work that is happening in lots of different sectors and disciplines to improve the health of a community, and not just to do this work in Flint, but to share our best practices to communities across our great state and across the nation who are struggling with so many of the same kind of inequities. And a lot of those grants are federal grants. We have a lot of blended grants. We have foundation grants, and we have state grants, and other kinds of grants, but a lot of those are federal grants. And there is tension and unease and uncertainty every day. Are those grants going to continue? Are they going to be renewed? Are we going to be able to keep the people that we have hired, these junior faculty whose dream was to solve big problems and to be academics? Will they be able to have a job? So I'll share one example of kind of a big grant that is kind of in the state of limbo. So after the water crisis, we knew that it was really important for us to kind of follow folks over time. And that following folks over time is surveillance, is kind of epidemiology 101. So we knew, like, after other big disasters in this country, that we would want to establish something called a registry to follow people over time. So after the water crisis happened, we went to the World Trade Center registry and said, hey, how did you do this? How did you create the infrastructure to be able to follow people and support them? And we talked to lots of other places that had a bad thing happen and knew that they needed to follow people because the consequences of that exposure often manifest years, if not decades later. So we built something called the Flint Registry, and we worked really hard to get it funded. And after kind of a year and a half of lobbying and trips to DC, working really closely with our MSU government affairs staff in DC, we got funding for the Flint Registry as part of a line item in the CDC budget. So every year, we get $5 million a year. MSU gets $5 million a year that goes to the CDC to run the Flint Registry. It is one of the largest registries in the nation. We have over 20,000 people enrolled in this voluntary registry. And it's not just following people, it's doing what MSU does. We're like improving public health. We see how people are doing, and then we've gotten them connected to all these amazing resources in the community. So we've made over 30,000 connections to different services, like data-driven, awesome public health improvement work. And in the fiscal year 2025 budget, it was the $5 million was included to continue the work of the Flint Registry. And then a few months ago, the entire lead department at the CDC was RIFT, a reduction in force. So, and those are the folks that run our Flint Registry. So we don't have, and also kind of was part of that department was all the lead programming for the country. The childhood lead poisoning prevention program for the whole country has been eliminated. So we have no program officers, we have no program staff. We're in this kind of state of limbo. It might get renewed, it might not get renewed. It could be in the next year's budget, it might not be in the next year's budget. So this kind of state of uncertainty is what is being felt in a lot of academia and a lot of grants. Will we continue, will we not continue? And just having this uncertainty creates a pause in the work, and we often then lose incredible talent, and it's hard to move forward.
Yeah, I did inquire to HHS this morning, and they got back with me and said this program will continue, but they didn't say how it's going to be part of the restructuring. Secretary Kennedy has not done all that yet, and so we're still kind of waiting. And obviously, you don't really have a sense of, if you could say it's going to, the funding will continue. It's just like the Department of Education, right? The funding will continue, but who's going to actually shovel the money and whatnot, and do the follow-up and all the functions of government. So, Matt, you had some thoughts about this?
Well, this goes to the uncertainty point that Dr. Mona raised. We take for granted in this country that we have this remarkable infrastructure of federally funded research that is done at the university level, and that's been one of the really underpinnings of this incredible university system that we enjoy here in the United States, which was a key bedrock of our competitiveness. Every major, the 10 most valuable companies on the New York Stock Exchange right now all stand on the shoes of some technology that was originally developed at a university or by federally funded investment. So think about every internet company was funded by DARPA research. Tesla was funded by a $400 million loan from the DOE. SpaceX was funded and stands on the shoulders of technology developed by NASA. All of this started with an influx of talent that came from Western Europe at the beginning of World War II. And that is what built up a lot of our research universities in this country. That talent is now under threat. It's mobile. The European Union has approved a 500 million euro fund to recruit talent, mainly from the United States. The government of Great Britain has approved a 50 million pound fund, and the researchers are listening. So the journal Nature did a poll earlier this year and just simply asked 1,000 or so researchers, are you thinking of leaving? 75% said yes. So all of this talent is mobile, and uncertainty does not help keep people here, right? So if you have an alternative that's certain, it's very likely that we're going to lose some talent. And to the point made earlier, that continuity of research is really important because a dollar spent at the federal level today shows up in the economy roughly 12 years later. So it's important that we have this level of continuity and that we continue to fund this research at a high level, because frankly, other countries, namely China, now spend more on R&D as percentage of their GDP than we do. Right, so we need this to continue to be competitive in the world.
Dr. Crawford, are you going to go do some pancreatic research for the Germans?
No, the Portuguese seem really good.
But I mean, in all seriousness, is that in your job? Is there people knocking at your door?
All the time. I mean, this is what I have to deal with all the time, and I can't really give them the confidence that things are going to be better here now, because none of us know. And that's, the best I can do is be honest and say, do what you've been doing, do the best you can. But yeah, you've got to look, you've got to pay attention, you've got to keep your eyes open. Where can you continue to do what you're good at? And that's not always with us. And I just want to bring up, I don't know what people think it was like back in December 2024. It's like cancer funding. If you put in a cancer grant to the National Cancer Institute, only the top 9% of those grants were going to be funded in the first place. It was already very depressing. It was already
so competitive.
It's just having the young people look at us and say, I don't want that kind of stress in my life. That was hard, because that's what we trained them to want to do. We trained them to do what they want to do, but we want to keep the research going. And that was already stressful, and now they don't even know if that's going to be funded.
Yeah, we're losing brilliant minds who want to go into science, who want to make a difference in the world, who want to be academics.
And who will train the next generation
Right.
after that. If
And
they're all gone, it's all gone.
And they're going to end up going into business.
Yeah.
Like banking.
Well, don't nothing wrong with that.
Just kidding. maybe journalism. We need journalism.
But I mean, are there also universities in other countries that are seeing this as an opportunity
Absolutely.
to move in on the Michigan States and U of M's and Wayne States of the world?
I wasn't kidding about Portugal. You've already mentioned Great Britain. I mean, I'm just even in my field, those are two big ones. And the Chinese, let's just face it, the Chinese are going to pilfer. I mean, ironically, I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, where the space program started, where NASA was a big deal. We saw the brain drain in reverse, draining towards us in that period of time, and now what we're going to see is going the opposite direction. And I don't think we're going to like what it looks like. Prevention research.
Yeah.
The only reason you know about prevention research is when there is no prevention research, when things are not prevented. And then you're going to wish you had prevention research.
Yeah.
So it's very invisible and incredibly important, and in diseases and in health in general.
Yeah.
And to your point, Chad, from a business point of view, every business it thrives first and foremost when their workforce thrives. So health is wealth in a lot of ways. And if we're not doing right by our citizens to improve health outcomes, that doesn't help anybody, right? It certainly doesn't help anything economically, let alone what it's like to, what it's like to have a lived experience that is suboptimal relative to what it could have been had we stayed the course and continued to fund research.
Chad, I would just add about a welcoming climate for researchers. So I am here because there was a welcoming climate for researchers. So my family immigrated to this country, fleeing an authoritarian regime to come to the US, where my dad ended up at Michigan Tech University as a researcher. So he was a metallurgist, and we lived in the UP, and he did research, and then we ended up downstate. And at that time, it was this great place to come as an immigrant, as a scientist, as a young scientist, to build a family and to do, to achieve that American dream. And, we have brilliant minds across the world who wanted to come here, but now they don't see it as a welcoming climate to be an academic or a researcher.
Follow up, Matt, about businesses that have greatly benefited from the government funding their research. I mean, if Elon Musk's SpaceX and Tesla were the beneficiaries of early technology and research in building rockets and making batteries that make cars, go down the road 300 miles, why would he be trying to destroy it all? I mean,
That's a great question. And I don't think anyone has a great answer. I asked Kevin one time when he was in Washington, and for the room's benefit, Kevin is doing an incredible amount of work to advocate on behalf of MSU in a way that's productive, and then hopefully is a way that's constructive and returns benefits back to the university. But ordinarily, as a business person, you normally look at these situations as a negotiation. Okay, what do you need? What is the list of demands? And there isn't one. I mean, it's a very opaque situation, which only adds to the uncertainty. No business or no organization can thrive in this level of uncertainty. And so having some clarity obviously would help a lot in terms of, all right, what's the goal here? What is the objective that you're trying to achieve with these cuts? And there isn't one that's been clearly articulated to my knowledge. But I do know this, that if you look at the research pyramid, the very basic research that gets done in this country is federally funded research for the most part. What happens then is that research then gets de-risked and it's able to become commercialized. And that's why we have, for example, the MSU Research Foundation, which takes these great ideas that look to be commercial and that we're able to bring those to market. But it takes a lot of work in order to do the basics to get you and to get an idea to that place. And if we don't do that, what we're going to end up doing is living in a house without a basic foundation.
Dr. Mona, when you were here in 2016, I recall you were kind of given a hero's welcome, I think is a way to
Deservedly
describe it.
so.
And there was a big fundraiser for the Flint Kids charity. There was a lot of emphasis around and a lot of bipartisan efforts around trying to fix what government broke. And here we are 9 years later, and you are seeing what is happening at the federal level, which will then transpire at the state level because the state budget is so tied to the federal funding. How are you feeling about sort of the things 9 years later, as you sort of look at these experiences, how you came in, we came to know you because of an austerity event, for lack of a better term.
Oh, you nailed it. So there's been a lot of reports and investigations about why Flint happened. How could this have happened to a great American city in the middle of the Great Lakes when there's all these laws and policies? How could it happen that this city for 18 months had kind of poisoned water and nothing really happened? But it was the voice of science and academia that finally kind of made a difference in the story. There was one report by, if you remember, the Five Guys task force. So Governor Snyder had a task force of 5 guys. I was really upset it was 5 guys, but it was 5 guys. But they were great guys, and they kind of wrote up how did this happen? What was the crux of this situation? And they pointed to austerity, and it wasn't just the austerity of changing the water to save money. But it was years of austerity in state government and federal government that really had hollowed out our bureaucracies, our Department of Natural Resources at the time, our public health departments, where they had become skeletons of themselves, and they only really could react to crises, and they didn't have the infrastructure to really be proactive and to prevent issues. So it was these chronic attacks on big government, this desire to make government so small, that was one of the reasons that Flint happened, because there wasn't that memory and that knowledge and that competence. And I'm not saying that we need big government, but we need trains to run on time. We need transparency, and we need representation, and we need to be able to have the infrastructure in place so that government works for people, and it's hard. So there is a lot of resonance today because we are slashing government. We want it to be small, not we, people want it to be small. Attacks once again on big government and inefficiency. And what we are going to see is something, I had a quote in the Washington Post a few weeks ago when they cut the whole lead department and they were, wanted to reverse a lot of these laws that we helped strengthen over the last decade. And my response that we will see 1,000 Flints to come because of this, because of these attacks on government, these austerity-driven attacks on government with no regard for public health, these kind of anti-science attacks. We will continue to suffer. And there's once again a lot of resonance to what happened about a decade ago.
Dr. Crawford, earlier you mentioned that we're years and years, or we're very close to solving pancreatic cancer, that a 6-month disruption will be really hard to just start back up. Can you talk a little bit about what that really looks like if there is an interruption of 6, 12, 18, 4 years?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've kind of already touched on it. I mean, what we have, like, very specifically is that, we know pancreatic cancer is driven by a particular mutation. We had no idea how to drug that mutation. Back when I was a graduate student, if you look at the textbooks, actually all the way up until the early 2000s, they called this mutation undruggable in the textbooks. 14 years ago, someone came out with the first drug that could target this mutation, and now there's 50 more drugs that are all able to target this protein. We also know that cancer is a foul beast. It's going to find a way to get around it, but we've been preparing for 40 years about what happens if you don't have that mutation, what's going to happen then. We're ready for the resistance. We're ready for everything that this cancer is going to try to do. Well, not everything, I shouldn't say that. False promises are not something I like, but there's a huge amount of promise in the clinic right now. I mean, these things are in the clinic right now, and we know that they're effective. And what's going to happen is we end up with that 6-month period where everyone's afraid to become a researcher, where everyone's afraid this is not a job where they can raise their child with, or they can't bring home any money to send them to college or even feed them. They're not going to do that work anymore. So who's going to carry this football over the line? There's not going to be anybody left. I'm going to be dead. It's like another 15 years is what we're waiting for. And I'm sorry, but I want to retire someday too. But by the way, I don't want to lose my job right now. But my entire job,
Your boss is right there.
I know, my entire job. Let's face it, cancer researchers. My entire job is to put myself out of business, to cure it, to get rid of it. And I have nothing left to do.
Yeah.
So, you know what? Bring it on. If that's the way you want to fire me, let's do it. But not this way.
A couple of years ago, well, actually, this is like 10 years ago. I was at the Truscott Rossman Punchki Day event. Those of you who've been
Talk
there.
about, I get accused of geeky stuff. Now that is geeky stuff.
Yes. Well, this was a very pure Kelly Rossman McKinney thing for those who know the late, great Kelly Rossman. And standing around, and it was talking about primaries, because that's what people talk about, at Punchki Day. Who's primarying who? And there was this university lobbyist who was talking about my chairman might run for the Senate. And I was like, your chairman? And then I figured out he was talking about Pashoka, Al Pashoka, who was then the chairman of House Higher Education Appropriations. And then he was talking about a few other people, but basically he was just talking about people like on the House Higher Education Appropriations Committee. And then we started talking about this State Senator Mike Lee, and he was going to get challenged by Kevin Daly, representative from Lapeer County, and this lobbyist didn't know who Kevin Daly was, and I was like, he's a third-term rep. You probably ought to get to know him. He's a farmer from Lapeer County. He probably has a few opinions about the MSU extension, and this lobbyist was like, but it was like kind of like telling to me like that someone who's remained nameless here, university lobbyist didn't have any connection with a third-term rep. And I've used this I've thought about this many times over the years about how do groups and entities try to connect with lawmakers and try to get people to understand what their issue is, and so that when the crisis comes, and I think you all kind of agree there is a crisis now. How do you all get in front of those people and get them to be your advocate, so they can maybe one person there's probably this many people in Michigan who can pick up the phone and get on the phone with the Oval Office, but you got to there's a succession of people to get to those 4 people. So I don't want this is a long way of getting to a question here, but my question is, what do you think you need to do now? What is the action items for folks at this conference if they want to try to save the pancreatic cancer research or save the Flint registry or the other just general R&D. That we certainly have a ton of R&D in this state as well.
I think it's a really important question. I know everyone's going to have an opinion, but the main thing is that it's our responsibility. So we need to be better communicators about what we do. We spend really all of our time writing papers and writing grants, and that's what we have to do to function. But if the public doesn't understand that's what we're doing, why we're doing it, what is happening in the laboratory, what we're bringing to them in the next few years, that's our fault. And we need to be better communicators.
Chad, I think in addition to doing the work, everybody always says you want to create the relationship before you need the relationship. Okay, that makes sense. The other part, though, is that you also, I think, we have to bring, to your point, a different mindset to that conversation. What's, to me, behind the mindset of the current administration is a zero-sum game. It's either or. You can have a balanced budget, you can have small government, or you can have what we have, right? To me, it's an and. Meaning, these investments that we're making, for example, in higher education research, these are ands. Yes, and. We can do that, and we can balance the budget because this actually grows the economy, right? And so it's that mindset that I think we need to continue to focus on. We talked about it here at the conference 2 years ago, the power of and I think that more of that mindset needs to be brought to the table as we communicate the story around the value to people on the ground who are just people, regardless of how they identify politically or any other way. They're people who need to be taken care of, and that they all benefit from these sorts of investments, and that's what they are, they're investments.
So I would echo what was shared regarding communication. So during the first Trump administration, I was asked to co-chair the inaugural March for Science with Bill Nye, the science guy, which was so cool to hang out with Bill Nye.
I was there.
You were there?
I was there.
All right. It was a rainy day in DC.
It was a rainy day. Yeah.
And I was so excited to do this because my message was to other scientists and academics and physicians that we need to get out of our ivory towers and classrooms and labs and clinics and get in and be more comfortable in these public spaces. My last article was in the Washington Post last week. It was not in the Journal of XYZ. I'm still publishing in the Journal of XYZ, but it's almost more important to be able to talk to the general public. But we were never trained to talk to journalists and to talk to policymakers. It's getting better now, but we have to seek out those opportunities and practice those opportunities. Fortunately, that was part of my professionalization as a pediatrician. We were always trained to be advocates. So when the water crisis happened, it wasn't my first time talking to a legislator, nothing like it was then, and it wasn't the first time talking to media, but we have to seek out those opportunities, and we have to embed those trainings in the kind of the training of future scientists. So that's part of it. And then I would also say, my lexicon has changed quite a bit. I can tell you also, for example, the return on investment for every lead pipe we replace, the societal savings of that. I can tell you how, for example, our RX Kids program, which is eliminating infant poverty, which embassy was leading, how that program is an economic stimulus for local communities. Like, I used to only talk like health and science and what's good for families, but I have now these other kind of things that I can talk about because I'm often asked about that. The last time I testified before Congress about the Infrastructure Act, people are like, well, we can't afford this. We can't afford to dig up every lead pipe. And in my pocket, I had a response, we can't afford not to. There's a cost of inaction, and this is exactly what the price is. So my kind of lexicon has changed to be able to be part of these conversations and to influence people who also care about these things.
We have time for questions from the audience right now. If anybody has some questions for the panelists, we'd love to hear from you. Right here in the front row.
Thanks, great panel. Here's a question maybe specifically for Dr. Crawford. Let's just say the federal funding goes away or is severely cut, and it's not going to change for months, years, 4 years possibly. How many other Dr. Crawfords are there in other universities? How many others of you are this close to solving pancreatic cancer And how do universities now start to collaborate maybe differently? What would cause you to do something different than maybe you've done in the past to work around the dilemma that you face?
So I have a sort of a different problem than what you're presenting, because pancreatic cancer for several years was completely underfunded compared to every other cancer. And what that did was build a coalition of national and international scientists who all work together. I mean, there's always one or two that's not going to help and not going to work with you. They want the glory or whatever. But it's a huge community of people who I call my friends, and they call me their friend as well, because we all work together to solve this problem. And I think that this is actually pancreatic cancer research has become a really great model for all the different types of health research, particularly cancer research. They look at us and say, you have a great community. We have a great community because we have a huge problem and no money. And now if we have less money, that's a whole different question. We're already working together. There are already a lot of me out there, and they're all under the same threat that I am, and of course everybody that they train. And of course I've trained people that are professors other places too. They're where I put my hope. And I don't know what's going to happen to them, and I don't know what to tell them. So I have to say that what we would love to say, so even now, even before, we had to rely on federal funding, philanthropy, and foundation funding. And philanthropy and foundation funding just cannot supplement what the federal cuts are threatening right now. So, I mean, really it comes down to, can you convince more people with billions of dollars to say this is the funding you need to do, but by giving pancreatic cancer funding, do you not get enough funding for the lead
Small
pipes?
babies with leukemia.
Right,
I mean,
yeah,
like
exactly.
kids with
These are-
sickle cell. I mean, the same situation. You could replace pancreatic cancer with any other condition. And there's collaborations of researchers. They go to their conferences together. They work together. They do all kinds of different things together, but they're all under threat.
Right, and having experts at the National Institutes of Health looking over our grants with their specialization, looking at the grants written into that specialization, saying, yes, this is worth it. This is worth being one of the 9% that are going to get funded. And I don't want to be looking at leukemia grants. I would do a terrible job at it. But the idea here is that experts are looking at that and vetting that and saying this is worth it. And that's what we're going to lose. And I don't know what happens after that.
And I would also reiterate what Dr. Crawford said. Like, it was already just like 9% of grants were funded. Like, you have to be so exceptional to get an NIH R01, to get an award. So, like, we needed to be doubling down these dollars. This is not a time for retreating. Like, to solve these big problems that only universities can solve, we needed like 3-5 times more dollars to be able to do this work.
Question?
I have a question for Matt. When it comes to the times we're living in, this is the most divisive times I think I remember in my lifetime. How do you talk about the power of and? You know, some people want small government. Some people want government out of education, or they want educational facilities to do exactly what they want them to do, but also talk about the research that we need. How do we do that rather than either or?
Well, I think that, thanks for the question. I think personally, this is I'm speaking on another panel tomorrow. We're going to talk about the exact same thing. We're going to talk about uncertainty. We're going to talk about the clock speed, the pace of change. We're going to talk about the opacity of the why. And, you know, the word that I land on is chaos. You know, and really the challenge that we all have in this room as leaders is how do you tame that chaos? And to me, the challenge really is to get really clear on what are the things that are going to make a difference, not just getting through today's crisis, but maybe creating some healthy tension that helps you work through the big issues that really make a big difference, right? How do we really drive positive health outcomes for all of us, for example, in the state of Michigan and around the world? These are the kinds of things that we need to get really clear on, and those are the areas where you can start to say, okay, these are the win-wins that we can build, and we can start to say, well, maybe funding research like this is not an or, it is an and, because when I do this, now I can see, for example, the return on that, because I'm much more better educated on that. And I'm also got more people around the table who are all invested in that outcome. So to me, this is more of these issues, these really big, weighty issues, you want to bring the power of and to solve them, because we don't have playbooks for this stuff. If the playbook's written in either or, you know, option A or option B approach works fine. But when you don't have a playbook and you have to write it, that's when you have to come together, define a win-win, and move forward together. And I think that's exactly where we are in this room, because in the words of my friend Carrie Dugan, no one's coming to save us. we're going to have to save ourselves, and the way we're going to do it is the power of and.
Dr. Hanna, what is the ROI on those lead pipes? And if you could just elaborate on that, I'd love to know more.
Sure. So the return on investment of lead pipe replacement, I'm happy to send you some articles. However, the EPA recently released a report, and we actually did some research here in Michigan as well, because Michigan was the first state to adopt a model lead and copper rule, which mandated the replacement of lead pipes over the next 20 decades. And then the national government, the federal government, finally updated after 30 years the lead and copper rule, which mandated replacement of all lead pipes across the nation over the next 10 years. So this all happened because of Flint and because of Michigan really leading the way and protecting now the health of millions of people across the country. So when they calculated the return on investment, it included things like cost savings when it comes to special education, healthcare, criminal justice, increased economic productivity, but also cardiovascular health. So lead is one of the leading causes of hypertension, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular disease, which is one of the greatest costs to our healthcare system. So I don't remember the exact number, but when you add all those things together, there is a significant return on investment when you do that prevention work.
Okay. Any more questions?
So
Well,
I'm just going to say
yeah, please.
one last thing, because it bounces off what was said earlier. The other thing that really, the idea of the power of and, the education and research go hand in hand. We have a program to go into the secondary schools, the science classes in Detroit, to try, what we did do was try to convince students that science was worth doing and to take on the education that they need to make a profession in science, to bring new perspectives to the health disparities issues or anything else, and just to convince them that it was worth doing. It breaks my heart. I can't even do that now. I can't go there and say, this is something that you need to think about. This is something that you need to do. I can't tell them that now. I don't know what to tell them. And it's just, to me, that's the worst part.
Can I end on a happy note real quickly?
Yes.
So,
What, not pancreatic cancer? What is it?
So it is the best job in the world to work for a university, because we can ask really big questions, and we don't just have to talk about it and write articles about it. We can work to solve these big, impossible issues. And I think that's the and. We don't have to, we can keep, we keep going and we keep going, and we are this trusted entity, not just in our communities, but throughout the state, to solve these big problems. And only, to me, I love working for a university, because I can't imagine any other place where I can do this incredible, impossible work besides at a university that is committed to solving these big problems, and in this time is actually still solving those big problems. So once again, this is a time to double down on our universities, to be grateful for incredible leadership at our universities who are committed to making sure that we can continue to do this work.
Well said.
Please welcome back to the stage Kevin Guskiewicz.
So on that note of ending positive, as Dr. Mona just said, there is hope, and we do have to come together. Our University Research Corridor here in Michigan, our Research Universities for Michigan, we are committed to this work. So many people in the room have helped us over these past 4 or 5 months tell the stories, the important stories that I think are resonating with our congressional leaders. I've spent a lot of time up in D.C. Along with others in the room here and a lot of other university presidents, and I do believe that we're making some progress. It's about telling the stories. It can't be about woe us, look at what's happening to this group of individuals or this institution. It has to be about the impact to society, and you heard some of that today. And I think if it's framed that way, these stories will begin to resonate with those who can, in fact, make a difference. I was at our Big Ten presidents' meetings last week at this time, and there were 16 of the 18 presidents represented there, and in several of those states, they were already preparing for budget cuts within their state to higher education. I was pleased to be one of those who while we're preparing for the impact at the federal level, we are hopeful, and I know that there are some of our state legislators here that I've been out telling the stories about, and so thank you for supporting us and supporting higher education in Michigan. We can be one of those states that not just survives this, but can come out on the right end and having thrived and made a difference in having more stories to tell because you're supporting higher education in the way that we need you to support us in the state of Michigan. So with that, I'm grateful for incredible panelists today. There are many, many more stories that I know that they can share with you. Take some time to do that. Thank you for Business Leaders of Michigan representation here and others that I know support us in the way that you do. So with that, I think we are right on time, and I hope to have a chance to spend more time talking with you throughout the next few days here in Mackinac. Thanks so much.